The winter wind cuts across the Atlantic like a blade, carrying with it the acrid smell of diesel fuel and human fear. December 1944. Below deck, in the belly of an American transport ship, 200 German soldiers huddle in the darkness. They are prisoners now, stripped of their gray uniforms, dressed in rough wool blankets that scratch against, skin still bearing the memory of Russian snow and Norman mud. Prinzhureit. Muller presses his face against the cold metal hull and listens to the ocean's indifferent roar. 23 years old, captured near the Ardennes, he expects to die in America. The stories have reached even the deepest foxholes. Tales of American brutality, of prisoners shot while trying to surrender, of camps where enemies disappear into unmarked graves. The Reich's propaganda machine has painted the Americans as savage capitalists who show no mercy to the pure Aryan warrior. The ship lurches. Footsteps echo down the metal stairs. American guards, rifles slung loose across their shoulders, begin unlocking doors. "All right, boys," one calls out in accented German. "Time to see your new home." Muller braces for clubs, for shouted orders, for the violence that must surely come. Instead, the guard tosses him a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes and points toward the deck. "Welcome to America, Fritz." The first shock comes not from a rifle butt, but from warmth. As Muller climbs the stairs, his frozen fingers wrapped around the unexpected gift of tobacco, he emerges into bright winter sunlight, reflecting off snow-covered docks. American soldiers stand in orderly lines, but their faces show neither hatred nor cruelty. They look tired, professional, almost bored. One soldier, barely older than Muller himself, hands him a thick wool coat. "Put this on," he says. "It's cold as hell up here," but the second shock stops Muller's breath entirely. Waiting on the dock, steam rising in the frigid air, are field kitchens. The smell reaches him before his mind can process what he's seeing. Fresh bread, real coffee, and something that might be soup made with actual meat. An American medic checks each prisoner for injuries, recording names and treating frostbite with gentle efficiency. This is not the brutal reception they had prepared for. This is something else entirely. Something that doesn't fit the narrative of total war. Muller watches as his fellow prisoners, hardened soldiers who had fought across 3 fronts, begin to weep. Not from relief, not yet, but from confusion. They had been ready to die as martyrs. They had not been ready to be treated as human beings. The convoy of olive-drab trucks winds through Pennsylvania farmland dusted with December snow. Through the canvas flaps, the German prisoners catch glimpses of an America that exists nowhere in their understanding of the world. Electric lights burn in every farmhouse window. Automobiles, not just military vehicles but civilian cars, sit in driveways like casual promises of prosperity. Children wave from school bus windows, more curious than hateful. The abundance is overwhelming, almost obscene to men who have known only rationing and scarcity for 5 years of war. What they cannot yet comprehend is the scale of the machine that has captured them. Across 46 states, the United States has constructed the largest prisoner of war system in human history. Over 425,000 Germans will eventually find themselves behind American wire. More enemy soldiers than the Reich ever imagined could be taken alive. The logistics alone defy belief. 700 camps, from converted fairgrounds in Texas to repurposed civilian conservation corps facilities in Montana. Baseball diamonds become exercise yards. County fairground buildings transform into mess halls capable of feeding thousands. This is no improvised revenge system thrown together in the chaos of victory. This is American industrial efficiency applied to the problem of human captivity, planned with the same methodical precision that builds Liberty ships and B-24 bombers. The War Department has studied the Geneva Conventions not as humanitarian luxury, but as policy doctrine. Every calorie calculated, every square foot of housing space measured against international law. The enemy will be fed according to precise nutritional standards. The enemy will receive medical care identical to American soldiers. The enemy will be treated with a systematic decency that serves purposes larger than mere compassion. In Washington, officials understand what the shivering prisoners in Pennsylvania trucks cannot yet grasp. This war will end, and when it does, America will need Germany as an ally against whatever comes next. The Red Army advances from the east with different ideas about how to treat a defeated enemy. The choice is becoming clear. Germany must be conquered by example, not merely by force. The truck convoy slows, turns through gates topped with barbed wire, and stops. Camp Aliceville, Alabama. As the prisoners file out, stretching cramped limbs and squinting in the bright southern sun, they see neat rows of wooden barracks extending toward pine woods. The buildings are freshly painted, the pathways swept clean. American guards lean against fence posts, smoking cigarettes and reading letters from home. There is no brutality here, no chaos. There is only the quiet efficiency of a system designed to hold enemies without destroying them. Muller carries his small bundle of possessions, a change of underwear, a photograph of his mother, the Lucky Strikes, from the dock, toward his assigned barracks. The building smells of fresh lumber and disinfectant, 24 bunks, each with clean blankets and a pillow. Windows that actually open, a coal stove that radiates genuine warmth. At the foot of each bunk, an American soldier has placed a small cardboard box containing soap, toothpaste, a toothbrush, and a small packet of writing paper. The third shock comes at dinner. The mess hall fills with the sound of hundreds of men discovering abundance. White bread, actual white bread, appears on long tables alongside bowls of soup, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. There is butter, real butter, not the ersatz paste they had eaten in the trenches. There is coffee, black and strong, served in ceramic cups that don't leak. There are cigarettes for anyone who wants them, American brands that taste nothing like the harsh tobacco rations of the Wehrmacht. A prisoner at Muller's table, a sergeant named Klaus, who had fought in North Africa, stares at his plate as if it might vanish. "They feed us better than we fed our own men," he whispers. Around the mess hall, similar conversations begin in hushed tones. How can this be enemy territory when the food is better than home? How can these be the savage Americans when they offer seconds to anyone still hungry? The letters begin that first night. Cramped German script on American paper. Words that struggle to describe an impossible reality. "Dear Mother," Muller writes by the light of an electric bulb that burns without flickering, "I am well and fed. The Americans have given me more food today than I have seen in months. I do not understand this place, but I am alive." Across the camp, similar letters pile up in the mailroom. Censors read each one, noting the recurring themes of disbelief and gratitude. The psychological warfare has begun, though few recognize it as such. Every meal becomes a small defeat for Nazi ideology. Every act of casual decency challenges the narrative of American barbarism. Every cigarette offered freely undermines the story of capitalist cruelty. But not all prisoners accept this new reality willingly. In the darker corners of the barracks, Nazi loyalists begin to organize. They call the abundance a trap, the kindness a weakness to exploit. They whisper about maintaining racial purity, about staying true to the Führer even in captivity. Secret courts convene in the shadows, trying prisoners who seem too grateful, too willing to adapt to American ways. The tension crystallizes around the camp's most visible symbol of American generosity, the library. Shelves of books in German, English, and other languages line a converted barracks. Technical manuals, literature, newspapers that tell the story of the war from perspectives the prisoners have never seen. Maps that show the true extent of Allied advances. Photographs that document the liberation of concentration camps. Economic statistics that reveal the overwhelming industrial capacity of the American homeland. Some prisoners devour these materials hungrily, their worldview expanding with each page. Others refuse to enter the library at all, viewing it as contamination. The battle for German minds plays out in whispered arguments over chess games, in furtive conversations during work details, in the careful selection of which prisoners receive coveted positions as interpreters or camp assistants. The daily routine becomes its own form of warfare. Reveille at 6, followed by breakfast that would have been a feast on the Eastern Front. Work details that take prisoners beyond the wire, into contact with American civilians who treat them with a mixture of curiosity and casual indifference. Lunch served with cold milk and fresh fruit. Afternoon activities, language classes, vocational training, orchestral practice for those with musical skills. Dinner that often includes meat, vegetables, and dessert. Evening lectures on American history and democratic principles, attendance voluntary but well attended. The abundance becomes oppressive in its generosity. Prisoners gain weight, their hollow cheeks filling out, their color returning to normal. They receive medical care that surpasses what most had known as civilians. Dentistry, surgery when needed, psychiatric care for those showing signs of battle fatigue. The sick bay maintains American standards of cleanliness and treatment. No prisoner dies from neglect or deliberate cruelty. Spring arrives in Alabama with dogwood blossoms and the sweet smell of honeysuckle. Work programs expand, taking prisoners into the surrounding countryside to help with agricultural labor that supports the war effort. They pick cotton alongside sharecroppers, repair roads with county work gangs, build bridges under the supervision of Army engineers. The irony is not lost on anyone. German prisoners contributing to American victory while being fed better than many American civilians. In the fields outside Montgomery, Muller finds himself working beside an elderly black farmer named Washington, who speaks broken German learned from immigrants before the war. Washington shares his lunch, cornbread and molasses, and talks about his son fighting in Italy with the 92nd Infantry Division. "My boy's over there fighting your boys," Washington says without malice, "but here we are, working the same dirt." The conversation challenges everything Mueller thought he knew about American racial hierarchy, about the supposed corruption of democratic society. These encounters multiply across the South and Midwest. German prisoners see American abundance firsthand. Supermarkets filled with goods, automobiles in every driveway, children healthy and well-fed. They also witness American contradictions, the segregation that divides black and white communities, the poverty that persists amid plenty, the industrial accidents that claim workers' lives. But even the contradictions suggest a society confident enough to acknowledge its flaws, strong enough to sustain internal criticism. The letters home become more complex, more thoughtful. "The Americans are not what we were told," writes one prisoner from Camp Hearn in Texas. "They are neither angels nor devils, but something more dangerous. They are human beings who happen to possess great power and do not always use it for evil." Such observations filter back to Germany through Red Cross mail, carrying seeds of doubt about Nazi ideology into the heart of the Reich. By summer, the transformation becomes visible in unexpected ways. German prisoners form jazz bands, playing American music with enthusiasm that would have been unthinkable months earlier. They stage theatrical productions, including works by Jewish authors whose books had been burned in Berlin. They publish camp newspapers that include articles about American politics, sports scores, and movie reviews. The wire still surrounds them, but the boundaries of their world have expanded beyond anything their captors initially intended. The psychological pressure works both ways, however. American guards, many barely out of high school themselves, struggle with the humanity of their charges. It becomes difficult to maintain hatred for men who share photographs of their families, who help in the kitchen without complaint, who express genuine concern when an American guard falls ill. The war's moral clarity blurs in the daily interactions of captivity. Camp administrators document the changes carefully. Weekly reports flow back to Washington, noting decreased attempts to escape, increased cooperation with work programs, growing numbers of prisoners attending voluntary education sessions. The experiment in humane treatment appears to be succeeding, though success brings its own moral complications. Are they conquering German minds through kindness? Or are German minds conquering American hearts through proximity? The strategic calculation becomes clearer as the war enters its final phase. Intelligence reports from occupied Germany describe a population exhausted by total war, increasingly skeptical of Nazi promises, desperate for any alternative to continued destruction. The prisoners returning home through Red Cross exchanges carry with them stories of American abundance and decency that no amount of propaganda can fully counter. The summer of 1945 brings news that changes everything. Hitler is dead. Berlin has fallen. The Reich that promised 1,000 years has lasted barely 12. In camps across America, German prisoners gather around radios to hear confirmation of their nation's defeat. Some weep for the homeland they will eventually see again. Others feel a relief they cannot fully express. The war is over, and they have survived it in captivity that feels almost like sanctuary. But the end of the war does not mean the end of captivity. Repatriation will take months, even years. Labor shortages in devastated Europe mean that prisoners represent valuable human resources that cannot be quickly discarded. The camps continue operating, but their purpose shifts subtly. No longer holding enemies, they are now preparing future allies for the work of reconstruction. The education programs expand dramatically. Prisoners study democratic theory, learn about market economics, practice skills they will need in a rebuilt Germany. American officials understand that these men will return home with unique insights into the society that defeated them. They will carry more than memories. They will carry blueprints for a different kind of future. The return journeys begin in early 1946. The same ships that brought them west now carry them east. But the cargo has changed fundamentally. These are not the same men who cowered in darkness, expecting brutality. They have been fed, educated, and treated with a systematic decency that challenges everything they thought they knew about power and its exercise. Muller stands at the rail of a Liberty ship, watching the European coast emerge from Atlantic fog. In his duffel bag, he carries more than personal possessions. He has letters from American friends, photographs of Alabama cotton fields, a small American flag given to him by a guard who shared stories of his own German immigrant grandparents. Most importantly, he carries questions that will not be easily answered. How does a democracy treat its enemies? What obligations come with great power? Can abundance be a weapon more effective than bullets? The Germany they return to bears no resemblance to the nation they left. Cities lie in ruins, their populations surviving on minimal rations distributed by occupying forces. The contrast with American abundance becomes stark beyond imagination. Former prisoners find themselves in the strange position of explaining to starving civilians that the enemy had fed them better than the fatherland ever had. In bombed-out Munich, Klaus the sergeant opens a small restaurant using skills learned in an American camp kitchen. He serves simple food with a generosity that surprises his customers, refusing to water down the soup or reduce the portions when ingredients run short. "The Americans taught me something," he tells his wife. "There is strength in abundance, power in plenty. A full stomach makes better citizens than an empty one." Such stories multiply across the occupied zones. Former prisoners become translators for American administrators, help organize relief efforts, advocate for democratic political structures. They understand both German culture and American intentions in ways that make them valuable bridges between former enemies. Their influence spreads quietly through the mechanisms of reconstruction, carrying lessons learned behind barbed wire into the foundation of a new German state. The strategic wisdom of the camp system becomes evident in these post-war years. The Marshall Plan's success depends partly on German acceptance of American leadership, and that acceptance comes more easily from populations that have heard positive stories of American character. The prisoners' testimonies provide crucial validation for policies that might otherwise be dismissed as capitalist manipulation. But the deeper transformation runs beyond politics into the realm of values and expectations. A generation of German men has experienced systematic decency from a victorious enemy. They have learned that power need not always corrupt, that abundance can be shared rather than hoarded, that strength can express itself through restraint rather than brutality. These lessons, learned in camps scattered across the American landscape, become part of the foundation for post-war European democracy. The psychological warfare that began with hot showers and fresh bread extends into the Cold War era. When Soviet communism promises workers' paradise through revolution, former prisoners can testify to having seen actual abundance created through democratic capitalism. When communist propaganda depicts America as a brutal imperialist power, their voices provide contrary evidence based on lived experience. The irony deepens with each passing year. Men who were indoctrinated to hate America as the embodiment of racial corruption and capitalist cruelty become some of the most effective advocates for American values in Cold War Europe. Their credibility comes precisely from their status as former enemies. They have no obvious reason to lie about their experiences, no clear incentive to praise their former captors. The camps themselves fade into history, their barracks converted to other uses or demolished entirely. But their legacy persists in ways both subtle and profound. The men who lived behind American wire carry forward an understanding of democratic possibility that no amount of propaganda could have instilled. They become teachers, businessmen, politicians who help build the Western alliance that defines the post-war world. In the archives of the War Department, reports from camp commanders reveal the strategic thinking behind the policy of humane treatment. The ultimate goal, writes one colonel, is not merely to hold these prisoners, but to win their minds for the peace that must follow victory. Every act of decency is an investment in future stability. Every show of abundance demonstrates the superiority of our system more effectively than any battlefield triumph. The calculation proves prophetic. The Germany that emerges from occupation becomes not just an ally, but a showcase for democratic values and market economics. The men who return from American camps provide crucial human capital for this transformation, carrying with them both practical skills and philosophical insights that help bridge the gap between defeated enemy and trusted partner. As the decade turns, as the Cold War settles into its long confrontation, the lessons of the POW camps become clearer. Military victory alone cannot secure lasting peace. The defeated enemy must be not merely conquered, but converted, not just occupied, but convinced. The systematic decency practiced in camps across America represents an early experiment in what would become a fundamental strategy of American global leadership. Though bread that was offered freely to hungry prisoners becomes a symbol of abundance as policy, of generosity as grand strategy. The hot showers that so shocked men accustomed to battlefield filth represent the power of basic human dignity to transform enemies into allies. The cigarettes shared without condition demonstrate the possibility of mercy in the exercise of overwhelming power. Decades later, as the Berlin Wall falls and the Cold War ends, some historians will trace the roots of Western victory back through the Marshall Plan, through NATO, through the democratic reconstruction of defeated Axis powers. But perhaps the true beginning lies in those first moments of bewildered gratitude when German prisoners realized they would not be beaten, would not be starved, would not be treated as their own ideology demanded enemies should be treated. In the end, the greatest weapon proved to be not the atomic bomb or the overwhelming industrial capacity that produced it, but something simpler and more subversive: the radical act of treating enemies as human beings deserving of dignity and care. The shock of unexpected decency accomplished what years of warfare could not. It made former enemies question the fundamental assumptions about power, morality, and the nature of civilization itself. The camps are gone now, their stories preserved mainly in fading letters and the dimming memories of men grown old. But the lesson remains, written in the architecture of the post-war world. Sometimes the most profound victory comes not from destroying your enemy, but from making him wonder why he was ever your enemy at all. Sometimes the greatest power is exercised not through force, but through the generous demonstration that force need not be everything. Perhaps this is the ultimate wisdom hidden in those Alabama cotton fields, those Pennsylvania work gangs, those mess halls where white bread and real coffee were served without ceremony to men who had marched under swastikas. Power exercised with restraint becomes more powerful than power exercised without limit. Abundance shared becomes abundance multiplied, and enemies treated as human beings sometimes discover that they need not remain enemies forever. The winter wind that once carried fear across the Atlantic now carries something else entirely. The knowledge that even in the machinery of total war, humanity need not be the first casualty. In the end, that knowledge may prove to be the most valuable treasure brought back from those strange American camps, where German soldiers learned to question everything they thought they knew about the nature of victory itself.